Warner, welcome back to this special edition that we are doing at IMS 2023 in San Diego. I'm joined by my inspiring friend, Laura Martin, who is the Director of Applications Engineering at Summit Interconnect. Laura, thanks so much for joining and just talking to you before we start recording. It's so good to get to know you in more depth and hear about your story.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So let's talk about your unlikely, your accidental path to engineering, and tell us first what you do for Summit, and then let's talk a little bit about your backstory.
Yeah, so I'm the Director of Applications Engineering for Summit. I came on board in January, but I am hiring and developing the field applications engineering team. So I work very closely with manufacturing and the customers, and we bridge the gap. Our goal is to provide the best-in-class service to help with, design input, manufacturing parameters and requirements, and just make the overall process go very smoothly and quickly.
So to avoid all those terrible calls that Jerry Partita and his team gets all the time, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and I'm trying to bridge some of those gaps with what I'm doing here on the podcast too, because what you don't know will hurt you. So whenever I talk to people about printed circuit boards, I always say that people that have gotten into the PCB industry, nobody did it on purpose.
Yep.
So I want to hear a little bit about your story that you started to share with me. So how'd you get here?
Yeah, I was about 22 years old, and I needed a job, so I applied at Lockheed Martin, and I got in the machine shop, so rough cutting material for the machinist, and they needed some help in their captive circuit board lab. So I didn't even know what a circuit board was or how they went together, but I was like, sure, I'll take the job. So they just put me to work as a technician, and scrubbing interlayers and laminating, drilling, all that. So I pretty much learned every process, and I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, well, you and I are similar that way. It was about the same age that I got into printed circuit board technology, and I was referred by a friend and went to work for a shop in inside sales, knew nothing, and I was talking on the telephone and taking down, okay, what's the size of the board and how many layers? That's how we used to do it in the caveman days. And then I would put the person on hold and go, what is solder mask? Or it'd be like, what's SMOBC? So I was so out of my depth at first, which sounds like you were, but you just jumped in.
Yeah.
And learned it. And I'm the same way. I found it so fascinating and so it felt like the first job where I didn't get bored, or I didn't master it and then get bored, and master it and get bored. It was new every day.
Yeah, that's what I love about it. It's just every day it's a new challenge, and you just cannot learn everything about it. It's impossible. There's just so much to building a circuit board, and the materials and the science. It's just I have never gotten bored with it, and I've been doing it for about 15 years, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I know. I'm the same. I relate to that very closely. Never ever boring, and just when you master something else changes, and something else happens. So you're bridging the gap between the your customers, right, and then inside the shop, and so you're training FAEs to help bridge those gaps when they're out calling on customers, or how exactly does that work?
Yeah, I believe an FAE should just be there as a consultant. So, you have somebody in the process of designing a board, and usually we're consulting on HDI type designs, just complex boards, and they reach out and they need some support to lay out the board and say, hey, how do I meet my requirements while making this manufacturable? And I think that's key, is getting involved early and just partnering together, because in some scenarios you'll just get a design and asked to build it, but there wasn't, that consultation. So it's really hard to go back and move things around. So, I feel like that's a key FAE job, is to really help with the design process, and then, into the manufacturing. So we consult on materials, requirements, IPC specifications. We stay up to date with those, and yeah.
So one thing I've been watching your career a little bit over the last couple of changes, and it was so refreshing to me to see a woman in our industry, because there's so few of us. So why do you think that's true? It's very different when I started. I mean, I was a real unicorn. There was just nobody. But it always interested me, like I said. So why do you think today, would you say, there's not more women in our industry? There's a whole lot more than when I started, but what are your thoughts on that?
That's a difficult question. I think maybe this industry hasn't been glamorized, maybe, or it's just a niche field that, isn't really talked about a lot. So unless you're in the industry, you don't really know that it exists.
Yes.
So when I talk to students and, younger people, I tell them, I'm like, hey, there's this whole industry that, is really fun to work in. You should think about it. So yeah, I don't really know what the answer is to that, but I do wish that there were more women in it. It's just a great place to be.
So let's go back to your story of getting into the industry. So when you joined Lockheed, did you have a degree at that time, or like?
No, I didn't. I was working a job. I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And, like you mentioned before, you kind of just fall into the industry.
Right.
So, yeah, I started working, and I was a technician, and I was just inspired to be an engineer, because I realized that that's what I really liked doing, was designing and building and working on problems. So I started going to school part-time at night while I was working. And it took me about 10 years, but I did graduate and get my engineering degree. And, that's just opened up so many doors for me. But I also have that whole background knowledge of hands-on manufacturing.
Yes, which makes a huge difference, and I think probably makes you really empathic. On both sides of the equation, as leading an FAE team, is that you understand the pains inside the shop, but you also have empathy as an engineer and understanding both sides, which I think makes your position in the industry really unique and interesting. Well, this is just a show, and this is just a teaser. I'd love to have you back and for us to dig more deeply into your story, into everything you're doing. What is Summit doing specifically here at the show? I saw a funny picture of Nino in your booth with the big boom box that was designed by Joe Grand that I know you guys had part in building, but what else are you guys highlighting here at the show? Yeah,
just, all of our facilities that we have and all the capabilities. We can build pretty much any type of board, and we have assembly as well.
Well, I'm a fan. I don't try to hide my partiality. You're like my favorite kid, right? I don't hide that, but I've watched Summit grow, and I think you guys are doing an outstanding job. And so I hope you have a great show, and thanks so much for stopping by today, and I hope you will come back, and we'll go take a deep dive into your whole amazing story, and then talk more about women in tech and how you and I might inspire some more to jump in with us.
I'd love that. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thanks for joining, Laura.
Thank you.
To our audience, thanks so much for joining us, and I hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Laura Martin of Summit Interconnect. We'll see you next time. Until then, remember to always stay connected to the ecosystem.